I walked up behind him. I was holding 2 open frames with almost 1,000 bees. The resulting scream was insane. R/nuclear revenge. Hey there, Mr. Reddit here. Welcome back to another episode of r/nuclear revenge. R/nuclear revenge is one of my favorite subreddits, and I really enjoyed making this. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the stories. We've got 3 awesome stories that we're reading today from r/nuclear revenge. Story number 1, humiliate me, hit me, fight my brother, 900 plus honeybees would like to help me break up with you. Story number 2 will be, man makes me endure 12 hours of pain. I destroyed his career. And story number 3, teacher bullies my dad, bullies my bro, gets nuked. Before we begin, hello to our newest subscribers, Katie, Florarina, and a fax machine. Humiliate me, fight my brother, 900 plus honeybees would like to help me break up with you. Throwaway account for obvious reasons, though I think if he or any of my immediate family reads this, they'll know who I am. It's not every day someone gets bee-swarmed by an apiarist's daughter. So here's the necessary background. I come from a family of sideline beekeepers, so I've been around bees my whole life. I have no problem being around creepy crawlies, and bees tend to be comforting in some way for me. It isn't like a pet though, more like a distraction from the real life. Anyways, I'm weird and I like bees more than people. My dad is a sideline apiarist, so selling honey and queen bees is his side business. His main job is an architect. I started dating a junior athlete in high school 2 years ago. He was everything I wanted when I was going through my teen fantasy phase. Tall, blonde, smelled great, and he was an absolute delight to be around. For the sake of the story, we'll call him Harris. Harris was a bit of a troubled kid. I knew his parents put pressure on him, but that often led to outbursts at others. Since I, his lovely bee-obsessed girlfriend, was there at all times, I was the easiest to lash out at. Now, I'm not a short girl by any means, but Harris, like I said, was tall. At the time, I hated to admit that I was truly afraid whenever he decided to pick on me, but these events were so far and few that I ignored them, because, you know, he was amazing. We had some of the best times, and he was the first and only guy I've ever hooked up with. I'll spare you the details, but I thought it was going to be a secret between me and him. My honeymoon with him died a year later, when he invited me to senior prom. I was a sophomore at the time, so I was super stoked to go. I picked out a dress and everything, feeling on top of everything. I was a bit on the heavy side back then, but not to the point it was noticeable unless I took off my clothes. Still, dress, something that isn't pants. I was excited. Who cares about arm fat? Well, apparently all of Harris' friends do. I almost forgot that these guys and girls were athletes, and I was not. As soon as I caught up with them, I found that they were in a total joking mood. Great, I loved jokes. So, Harris really loves you, said one of his friends. I know, I could act smug, I grinned. Yeah, I replied, and I love him too. Cue a kissing interlude here. His friend rolled her eyes and said something about me being weirdly cute. Harris grinned, took a break from me to talk. Oh really? Cute, like what? A baby hippo! She probably meant this in jest, but I thought it was unusual. Maybe I was self-conscious or something, and thought it was a fat joke. I didn't laugh, and I could feel my face go hot. I'd picked up a Coke earlier, and I was pretty sure it was heating up in my palms. True, Harris said in his ever-so-suave voice as he wrapped his arm around me. His hand traveled down the side of my dress, and he squeezed my stomach. She is my baby hippo, and I saw all of it. All of it? Excuse me? You mean all of her, and I'm right here, regretting to have ever come. Insert more laughter here. Then their conversation took off, and I mean it went from 0 to 100 really quick. He spilled the honey and told his friends, all 5 people here, about how he and I had hooked up. He said some off-putting comments about my body and the parts he wanted to touch. I was trying my damn hardest not to cry, since this could have just been a harmless joke on their part. Needless to say, I wasn't having any of it, so I excused myself. Not to the bathroom, but home. I called my dad to pick me up and not to let Harris' dad know. I wasn't in the area during spring break. My dad flew me and my brother, a year younger, 15 at the time, out to Pennsylvania for vacation. We went to the Hershey's chocolate factory and all, and I had a chance to clear my head. As far as I can remember, this was the last time my dad was actually pleased with me. When we returned home in 10 days, Harris popped in for a visit at a time he knew my dad wouldn't be home. My brother was, as he usually was, playing Minecraft on his computer in his room. I thought Harris visited to apologize for the whole baby hippo thing, but I was grossly mistaken. He punched me in the gut. I had never been punched before up until now, and it was truly horrible. Not only did it hurt, but it damn near made me throw up and knocked the wind out of me at the same time. He grabbed me by the shoulders and shouted at me. He said that I shouldn't have left on prom, how I shouldn't have embarrassed him in front of his friends, and that I should have called him when I was in Pennsylvania. My brother came running down the stairs when he heard the commotion. I had this urge to bend over and stay bent over, so I couldn't really focus on him. All I knew is that he went after Harris, cursing, shouting, and crying. I ran the other way the best I could, trying to breathe first and foremost. It was hard to do anything or think straight with this horrible taste in my mouth and nasal cavity, like I had thrown up inside my nose or something. It was gross, and it certainly pissed me off. Going for my phone was difficult, since Harris had already found his way away from my brother, begging me not to call the cops. I almost got the landline too, but Harris snatched it from my hand. He broke the cover, took out the batteries, and then proceeded to beg again. This time, he didn't touch me, and I told him to get the hell out. I cleaned up the house so my dad wouldn't see any of this. This was going to be my first and last fight with Harris, or so I hoped. At least he didn't check the landline. My brother was more injured and certainly devastated. He couldn't even ask if I was okay, and I took it as he knew I wasn't, and only proceeded to cry. He really looked up to Harris. Let's go 5 hours ahead, 10 p.m., and I'm still seething. We found out my brother had sprained his wrist, so we rigged up some sort of easy-to-remove ice thing. My dad was a hard man, so I knew he would get upset at first when he saw the mess we had gotten into. I can't remember what my intention was, whether I was going to tell him about Harris or not. I knew that he would be back the day after, so I had to exact my revenge right now. I shut the doors, windows, and waited for my brother to go to sleep. Now came the tidy bits. I shimmied into the other set of beekeeper clothes, the ones my mom wore when she was around to check on the apiary. I got the veil, the gloves, the boots, you know. Gotta be prepared. That night was particularly cold, and it felt very unreal. I was unpacking thousands of honeybees, moving them around until I got the right number of frames, all under my dad's nose, and I was going to release them on a living human being. We had roughly 30,000 bees per hive, and around 150 hives. Like I said, it was a side business, and we needed money. I knew at the time that 1,000 or so bee stings could kill, and I wasn't planning on going to jail. I was just going to make this hurt like hell. I isolated a fair number of bees between 2 frames with a bit of difficulty. There were maybe 900, 950. Not all of them would sting him, but I wanted to get him back for everything. Who punches their baby hippo, right? Once I had my bees in place, I set the single frame in its own hive closer to home. I called him and told him that I wanted to work some things out with him. No violence, none of that stuff. I lied through my teeth, telling him that I won't tell my dad and that I was doing all right. He showed up 5 minutes later and stepped up to my door. The porch light was the only thing illuminating him, and the rest of the place was dark. I removed the frames from the hive. I walked up behind him, beekeeper boots squeaking on the steps, frame in my hand. "Hi, Harris," I said. I thought it would sound cool, but I was crying. My voice broke. Voice breaking was the least of Harris's problems at the moment anyway. I was holding 2 open frames with almost 1,000 bees. Some of them were flying around, but I was fully protected. Harris, not so much. I swatted him with 1 frame and thrusted the other against his mouth, hoping I could get at least a single bee between his lips. A single bee sting hurts like hell and will hurt for a while. But the thing about bees is that they are a part of a true hive mind. A single bee dies, and all bees in the area go into defensive mode, stinging at whatever flesh and deter whatever attacker they can find in order to protect the hive. The frame I used to hit Harris likely killed a few of them. The resulting scream was insane. I had never heard him scream before. I almost expected the bees to fly away and hide in some other hive. But no, when bees defend, they really defend. It didn't help that Harris wore short sleeves and had his neck and face exposed, so the bees went for that. Fortunately for him, none of the bees went inside his mouth like I intended. They weren't stupid and wouldn't do that. Instead, they just kept stinging him. I ended up falling down the stairs and scrambling into the dark, looking to get away from him. Looking back though, He was in no position to fight, and I shouldn't have ran. But I did, and I got to watch him try to fight his way through the cloud of bees. I think he learned that killing one bee won't scare the swarm. Too long didn't read. Boyfriend revealed secrets, punched me for getting mad at those secrets, and sprained my brother's wrist. I dumped bees on him. Aftermath. He didn't die, he just took forever to recover, and he was pockmarked by scars. Me? I actually spent time in jail, but I wasn't sentenced. My dad was extremely upset at me for using bees as weapons, and I am currently in the process of working off that payment. He doesn't look at me the same anymore, and I really feel bad about that. I wish I had just gone to him at first. Edit. Thanks for all of the positivity, as far as it can go here. But I'd like to let you all know that my dad isn't a bad guy. I love him, and he's still understandably shaken by this. Please don't say anything mean about him. Sad face. Edit 2. I'm also getting questions about my sentence. I wasn't sentenced. The time I spent in jail was waiting for the court stuff to start, and Harris didn't come forward with any charges. He was the one who called the cops, though, and I got to explain that to them. I was a minor too, and Harris had just turned 18. As I've come to see, the law is very lenient towards minors. I have been in counseling and still will be for the foreseeable future. I'm also not allowed to handle firearms. Next up, we've got Man makes me endure 12 hours of pain. I destroyed his career. But first, mini game. For today's mini game, I want you to choose your favorite subreddit and leave me a comment letting me know which one it is. The winner will be selected at random and will be announced in an upcoming video, along with a featured post from your favorite subreddit. Feel free to enter as many times as you'd like to, and I look forward to hearing from you. Now, let's start our second story. Man makes me endure 12 hours of pain. I destroyed his career. I destroyed a man's career for making me needlessly endure 12 hours of constant pain. In my teens, I had to have numerous operations. Therefore, I always ended up at one particular hospital that specialized in my condition. Now, the hospital was high quality, with staff that was very caring and looked out for the patients they had. They gave you essentially the 5-star treatment. After all, they were charging our insurance an incredible amount of money, so that probably had something to do with it. But one particular operation I had, it all went to heck. It wasn't like this type of procedure wasn't something I had not done in the past. It was about the 3rd time I needed to have it done. No pressure whatsoever. Essentially, it entailed breaking both your legs, placing rods into them to put them back into the proper place so they would end up growing correctly. They would be in for a few months to heal, and then they were taken out. During that time, I would have to turn small little handles to reposition my bones according to a pre-printed out schedule given to me by my doctor. It hurt like heck, but it was worth it in the end. Despite how often I had done it, it was still extremely painful, especially for the first few weeks after the procedure was done. Any vibrations would send shockwaves of pain throughout your entire body, regardless of how doped up you were on painkillers. So the doctors took extra care to ensure that any trip back home was as smooth as possible. Literally, they all understood that without a jet back to your home city, for anyone more than 40 minutes away from the hospital, it was medically required that you travel back home in a med jet. Imagine every single bump you experience when driving for any period of time. Now, imagine being sent into a shockwave of 10 out of 10 pain every single time you went over that hump. You get the idea. Now, most hospitals offer a liaison to individuals within the hospital to deal with their insurance. Just have the individual talk with your doctor, and right away they work out what the doctor wanted with the company. No hassle. We didn't take up that offer because we understood how everything worked, and it was never an issue. But the hospital always offered us one anyway. And yes, these liaisons were not employees of the insurance company, but of the hospital. They were designed to look after the best interests of the patients and justify it to the insurance company. Then, our designated liaison decided that our request to not have one was unacceptable, and thus he would intentionally intervene at every change he could. He even went as far as to deny our nurse requests for extra pillows because the hospital only allows X number of pillows per person, despite the nurse literally stating it was fine. But nope, since he was a higher level, apparently he had the final say. When it was nearing our time to leave the hospital, like always, the doctor wanted to bill the insurance for the medical jet because it was medically required. Same old, same old. However, Our jerk liaison disagreed with the doctor's assessment that it was medically required, justifying his opinion based upon our insurance company's definition of medically required. Naturally, the doctor flipped his lid and verbally curb-stomped the idiot. Liaison: Listen, simply avoiding pain isn't something that the insurance will cover. It's not medically required to avoid pain. The doctor: Are you kidding me? You realize this patient would have to drive 12 hours in a cramped ambulance with 2 broken legs? In excruciating pain if they didn't fly? It's absolutely unheard of. You literally would have to have 2 EMTs escort them back home just in case anything happened. The cost is only marginally smaller than the damn jet. Plus, there is a small chance the rods could become disrupted if anything happens in the car. That's the justification. The odds of any crash happening are not high enough for the company to justify it. This will just hurt the company if they keep doing it. Listen, I don't know why on God's green earth you are even arguing with me. This isn't up to you. You are not a doctor. You have no medical training. You were given a damn list of the insurance company's policies, and now you think you can properly diagnose what is or is not medically required? I've done this for thousands of patients with this very company. Now get your butt back to your office. Bill that insurance company properly and just shut up. You work for us, not for them. I was in earshot of this entire conversation. A week later, on the day of departure, we learned what happened when we went back to his office. He had called the insurance company and began going through the proper channels to get the jet approved. However, he began dropping small hints to the rep that in his opinion, driving would also be fine. So naturally, on the day before our departure, we got a call from the insurance company denying the request. I was furious. There wasn't time to appeal the decision. There wasn't anything any of us could do. Even my doctor was stuck because the liaison worked for a different department and he couldn't even fire the guy. He apologized time and time again and ensured the 12-hour ambulance ride would be as comfortable as possible, and even told the driver to keep me as medicated as possible to ensure it went well. Naturally, it did nothing, and it was the most hellish 12-hour experience of my life. I was screaming the entire 12 hours. The ambulance wasn't even outfitted with a bed. It only had some type of hammock type thing. 2 EMTs had to endure non-stop screaming from everyone who didn't even belong in the ambulance in the first place. Everyone was furious. Everyone blamed that one man. Everyone wanted him fired. But they had no medical reason to fire him. The only way for him to be let go was for him to have caused the patient some type of harm that the doctor warned about. So, days after my trip, my doctor insisted that I see a medical professional in my own hometown. You know, ensure nothing happened on the trip. This was like the 3rd time I had this done, so it was a pretty common request that I was familiar with. As I was still fuming, this is when I hatched my plan. I knew I was the only one with the control over the rods in proper position. I knew having the rods not properly dialed in for a few days wouldn't do any long-term harm and would only result in a lot of pain to dial it back in afterwards. I knew my doctor would be furious if anything happened out of the ordinary, his reputation being on the line and such, and I knew no medical professional had checked my rods to confirm their current settings after the trip. So, I popped 3 pain pills, waited for them to kick in, and unscrewed every single rod to the lowest setting possible. Just for reference, after the procedure, they end up setting the starting point for these rods somewhere in the mid-range of their settings. Worst pain of my entire life. I was wheeled into the local doctor with the adjustment notebook in hand. I kept playing dumb, saying I believed everything was going fine, but my legs just felt awful. And if it was possible, he could make sure everything was going okay. He began his inspection, and his face went white when he realized where the screws were set. He asked me what setting they had been on when I left the hospital, and I told him. Again, he did not look happy. He told me that something must have happened on the trip, and he would need to properly adjust them back into place, and it would hurt like hell, but it needed to be done. The screaming at that appointment was, let's just say, disruptive. I didn't even have to fake it. It was genuinely one of the most painful things I have ever experienced in my life. My doctor was furious, as he was up to date on the entire liaison situation. He excused himself after the readjustment of the rods back to a room. I assume he thought it was out of earshot. He was wrong. He phoned my doctor out of state, and he had a few choice words for him. How could you let this happen? Do you know how dangerous this could have been? If he hadn't gotten an appointment with me this fast, his bones would have been permanently grown in the wrong place, and he would need another surgery to fix this mess. I don't know what kind of operation you have going on over there, but there is zero chance I will ever refer anyone in my clinic to you. Do you hear me? How hard is it to control your insurance handlers?" Fast forward to my operation to remove my rods, back in that specialist's office out of state. The liaison was not just terminated. Oh no, the liaison got accused of intentionally trying to endanger the life of a patient and lying to the insurance company. Lying about a doctor's medical assessment for his own benefit. No idea where this last accusation came from. Maybe it was lodged as an additional justification to fire him. I don't quite know all the consequences of his actions. I could only muster up a few details from my doctor. From what my doctor described, the hospital put out a notice to every hospital in the state to not hire this man. Those hospitals apparently also sent out a notice to all the hospitals in their surrounding areas to not hire this man. This ended up resulting in a domino effect that barred him from working in almost every hospital in the country. I wanted him fired. I didn't plan on getting him blacklisted. Nevertheless, I was pretty happy, especially after my doctor informed me that there was no lasting damage for the mistake that he caused. Fast forward about 4 years, and I hear through the grapevine that he ended up having to change professions because of the accusations. Ended up doing some waste management job or something. No idea if it's literal garbage man status or working in a waste management company at a desk job somewhere. Note, there are certain parts of my medical condition I had to leave out to stay anonymous, but it's extremely rare and extremely difficult to treat. Most of my doctors need to walk on eggshells to ensure I get properly treated. One of the main reasons my doctors are so passionate and concerned about my treatment. Edit. I've never received any Reddit awards before. The Silver Award means a lot. Thanks so much. Judgment time. What do you guys think? Was it wrong of him to do this to the liaison? Was it wrong of him to destroy this man's career? Please leave me a comment letting me know. And then we'll get started with our final story. Story number 3. Teacher bullies my dad, bullies my bro, and gets nuked. The town where this happened is a small one, and the school that I went to is a 70-year-old school. My granddad and my dad are also alumni of this school. Let me just start off by saying that the alumni of this school are really successful, and the school has had a long history of being very charitable and also offers amazing retirement benefits to teachers depending on how long they've worked there. My great-granddad donated some of his property to the school when it was being constructed, and he was an advisor and a part of the school board in his time. The school was an all-boys school up until 1996, when they had their first co-ed class, and is a full co-ed now. The school also has all classes from kindergarten to high school, split in 2 buildings. The first one houses kindergarten to 5th grade, and the other has the classrooms for 6th grade to 12th grade. Part 1. Teacher versus Dad. The Incident. Said teacher, we're gonna call her MD, was my dad's math teacher when he started high school. She was a young woman just finishing her teaching degree, and was a master's in math and chemistry. At that point, she was the most qualified teacher the school had. Unfortunately, MD was also a nasty person. She walked into the class and the students were expected to be sitting in ready mode, back straight, legs together, and hands on the laps, with only the needed textbook and a pencil to take notes on the margins. The class was expected to greet her with a "good morning" or "good afternoon" when she walked in, and she assigned tons of weekend homework. She would simply stop teaching for the entire hour-long class if one person spoke without having asked to speak. You couldn't drink water without her permission, couldn't go to the restroom unless she finally saw your raised hand and asked you to speak. There were multiple cases of people complaining against that, but with her being the most qualified teacher there, the school board didn't take action. Instead, they supported her by saying that this would help discipline the students. But this is not even the beginning of it. Her exams were incredibly hard, and with the classes being full of teenage boys, they would talk, and even one of them doing so would cause her to stop teaching and not teach until the next class. She would then lecture on a different topic, completely skipping that part of chemistry. Suffice to say, before the finals, the entire class was in a panicked state, trying to self-study enough to at least pass the class. My dad ended up getting a 41%. Our education system said you failed the class if you had under 40%, so he was relieved that he passed. But when he went through his answer sheet, my dad noticed that his totaling was incorrect, and that in fact he had a 49 on the test. He raised his hand, and after about 5 minutes or so of him just sitting in his seat, calmly with his hand raised, he was called on, and MD asked what the problem was. Dad told her that there was a totaling mistake on the final, and that he actually had a 49. This somehow offended her. Instead of calling him forth and checking his paper, MD decided that it was simply impossible for a master's in math to make a mistake in something as simple as addition. She waved him off and my dad was shocked, but she just calmly turned to the next person with a question. My dad, on the other hand, was not happy. He walked up from his seat, which was basically considered a crime in her class, and put the paper on her desk, and started totaling his points loudly. MD incredulously watched him do that, and was at a loss for words. Though, when he was done totaling, you could see her face was flushed, and she was furious. She looked furiously from the paper to my dad, and then back to the paper, and then suddenly, a cruel smile appeared on her face.
"Oh, okay. I see the mistake, but that is no excuse for this behavior. This awards a subtraction of 10 points from your final."
The class that was amazed at the first sentence went back to having grim looks, and my dad stood there, jaw dropped. Now he had 39 points and had failed this class. Instead of responding and making the situation worse, he simply took his final, packed his backpack, and left the classroom. He went and spoke to his granddad, who was on the school board, but he said he couldn't do anything since grades were completely in the hands of the teacher concerned. My dad took his loss and decided that revenge was not worth the trouble and switched classes. He dropped chemistry and took up economics. That was the last interaction he ever had with his teacher. Part 2. Teacher versus my brother and I. My younger brother is 2 years younger than me, and so, when I was in freshman year, starting high school, my younger brother was in 7th grade. We had an auditorium under construction, and the library was newly renovated, so a teacher was assigned to chaperone the younger class students at the library. My younger brother's class, unfortunately, had MD as their chaperone. My dad had specifically instructed me to be very careful around MD, and I was on the lookout, but my younger brother had no idea just who he was dealing with. Before summer, our library allows students to take any 2 books of their choice for the break. So, when my brother walked past MD to the librarian and was stopped by MD, he was really confused. He had an Enid Blyton book and a copy of Backyard Science Experiments. Both my younger brother and I are really good at science-related topics, and he had been waiting for summer break to do some cool science experiments at home with me.
"Wait a minute. What book do you have there?"
A storybook and a backyard science book, ma'am.
"What are you going to do with that backyard science book?"
Turning to the other library staff.
"I taught his father. No brains in there. You would have no idea what to do with this book. Leave it for someone who does."
And with that, she snatched the book from his hands and walked away, the library staff giving awkward laughs behind her. When he came looking for me, crying, I was furious. I was a really popular guy at school. I won quizzes and debates and represented the school in national competitions. My friends and I literally had the entire showcase of trophies at school with our names embossed on them, and most teachers loved us. Man, the vice principal of the school and our group were on first-name basis. He chaperoned us on all the competitions we represented the school in. But when he told me what had happened, I was dumbfounded. I had no idea how to react, but for the moment, I went to the library and got another copy of the backyard science book to console for my brother. But then, we were out for summer vacation, and I didn't think too much of it. Side note, in the summer we attended a science summit, and my school friends and I won prizes for having the most efficient hydraulic gear-based pulley system and the second fastest chemical fuel race boat. This was before I ever took a high school chemistry or physics course. This was announced in the school assembly the first day after summit break. When we came back for fall, I had a chem class with MD the first day of school. This was also right after the assembly, where my group was given the award. So we go to the chem lab, and MD is on the lab instructor's desk setting up an experiment designed to liberate hydrochloric acid fumes in a gas flask. Some moments passed by, and we could see that the mistake had been done, and there was no reaction in the mixture. Turns out the zinc granules were impure and rusted. But MD somehow got the idea that turning on the Bunsen burner on full blast would help the experiment. After collecting the gas for about 3 minutes, which is 2.5 minutes too long, since hydrochloric acid fumes are toxic if inhaled, she is satisfied. She then pulls up the flask to show the class how we do experiments. Cherry on the icing is when she opens the flask and brings it uncomfortably close to the girl beside me.
"Does it smell pungent?"
The girl awkwardly smells it and jerks away. To someone who has no clue, that would be a plausible confirmation, but I knew that it was complete horse crap. I could see that the girl knew about pungent fumes and cringed away on reflex, and not because it was actually pungent. I don't know why I did it, but at that moment I snorted loudly. MD instantly zooms in on me. Walking toward me with her face contorting into an ugly expression, she goes,
"Something funny you'd care to share with us?"
I knew I messed up, but I was also angry. This person in front of me had bullied my younger brother and my dad. I remembered that, and suddenly, all my verbal sensor shut down. "You and I both know that she didn't smell anything pungent. That experiment you just did was a failure."
"Oh, you think you know more than me?"
Turns to the class.
"He knows more than me. You know what? I'll step down. Why don't you teach the class, Professor Nicholas Fiend?"
Oh, absolutely. To the absolute shock of everyone watching, I walk up to the podium and while maintaining eye contact with MD, "First thing to remember, class, turn to Experiment 1 of your lab textbook. Read the warnings. The gas is pungent and poisonous."
"How dare you? Has no one taught you manners? This is no roadside shack, and you would do well to remember that. Else you're gonna have a couple broken bones."
This was in a different language, but if you want the exact translations, it was, "I'll break your limbs and feed them to you." She is absolutely furious, grabs me by the hand and proceeds to drag me to the principal's office. On the way there, we cross the vice principal's office, and he sees MD dragging me away and runs out. "What is going on here?" Before I can say anything, MD starts ranting to him about how disrespectful and unacceptable my class behavior is, and is heaving by the end of her spiel. The vice principal gives me a searching look, and then responds with a, "Go back to class, MD. I'll deal with him." We head back to his office, and he offers me a seat and a glass of water. "What actually happened in class, Nicholas?" he asks with a sigh. I tell him exactly what happened. Once he hears my side of the story, he looks at me incredulously and asks me if I really went to the podium and started lecturing the class. I look up and see the gobsmacked look on the vice principal's normally reserved face. Imagine someone who looks like a male Minerva McGonagall being completely shocked. I couldn't stop myself. It started with a snicker, which turned into full-blown laughter. I laughed till my stomach hurt and my eyes teared up. To my surprise, Vice Principal was also smiling wildly at that. He shook his head and that reserved expression was back. "I know that what happened there had you concerned for class safety, but that is no reason for such disruptive behavior. Aside from that, I'm personally going to investigate what happened in that class, and if MD is found to be intentionally forcing students to inhale harmful chemicals, she will be sacked immediately. Oh, and you're supposed to hand over a written apology to MD about this behavior. Now get moving." I sighed and headed back to class, and I really thought that I had ended MD's career. Oh, how wrong I was. She changed the story so it looked like she had purposely done the experiment wrong and was about to reprimand that girl for inhaling what could have been a harmful chemical. MD pulled one on me and had me look like I was just an insolent child who thought that he knew everything, be reading a chapter of the book. And here I stopped myself. This event was me just going in head on with a teacher who had been in the school for longer than 35 years. Part 3. Pro-Revenge Mode. Now I knew that to help my brother, I needed to get rid of her. My dad knew about what happened in school, and he wanted me to not engage MD. He said it wasn't worth it. But by now, I was in the game. She had played her card, and it was my turn now. I don't know what made it so that she had such a problem with my dad and my younger brother. They were quiet and hardworking students. I felt she had something against our family, and I was convinced that my younger brother would have to deal with the problem if I somehow messed up and got expelled or made a worse enemy out of MD. This was war, and I had a new plan. I started to act really sheepish around her, and made it a point to stay back after class and ask her questions in the most polite way possible. I was the kid who was guilty of not understanding the plans of elders. I portrayed myself as an amazing student who MD had succeeded in humbling. I slowly but surely made my way into the category best described by the term bootlicker. It hurt me inside to do it, but what I had planned, if this went well, made me lightheaded with anticipation. I was in it to win it. I conceded defeat in a fight to win the war. 2 years later, I am in junior year. My younger brother just started high school and he was taking the chem class with MD. I was the highest scorer in chemistry and was a pet to MD. She had started to like the Nicholas Fiend I had portrayed and made me a lab assistant for that year. 2 of my best friends knew what I had planned. Everyone else in class hated me for being the teacher's pet and getting straight A's when the next highest grade was a B-. Everything was going according to plan. On the first day of class, I replaced her stool, one of the 3-legged ones, with a broken stool. This was supposed to be the first in a series of pranks that would hit her that day. She came to class and went to take her seat, and boy, she fell. Well, she somehow hit her hand on the wall and cried out. Yup, that must have hurt. But she was definitely overweight, and it couldn't be traced back to me. I smiled on the inside as I rushed to her and helped her back up. I ran and fetched her another chair, while inside the freshmen were trying their best not to laugh. When I got back from the room that had extra stools, I walked in to the sight of her screaming like a banshee. But what got me furious was that she was screaming at my younger brother. Apparently, she had said something like,
"Stupid stools and stupid lab assistant fools."
To which my brother had responded with, "It's not my brother's fault you're too heavy for that stool." Though I loved him for it, he really needed to learn where to come to my aid. But then I didn't do much and just replaced the chair silently, while silently trying to communicate to my brother to calm down. Nothing else of concern happened that day till the time when school was over and the teachers were heading back. Stage 2 was in motion. We heard a loud bang, and immediately the large crowd of students nearby all headed towards the teacher's car parking lot. We saw MD's car smoking and her exhaust blown right off. Keep in mind, it was an older car, and we had decided to block off the exhaust with clay that had hardened over the course of 6 hours on a sunny day. Well, that car had to be towed, and she went home with some other students that day. She didn't show up to school for 2 days after that, but she did show up to school on the third day, which was only half a school day, because our country celebrates Teachers' Day. It is tradition that students go to their teachers, current and old, and wish them the best, give them cards, gifts, etc. This was by far the most ambitious prank pulled in the school that I know of. The 2 days she was absent, we went around telling people to not visit her on Children's Day. It helped a lot that my friends and I were some of the most popular people in school, and with the other cool guys and girls agreeing to that. We spread the word and got confirmation that no one from the entire class in my year was going to go wish her on Teacher's Day. But what actually happened was something no one could have expected. I guess it could have been because we acted so fanatical about it, that our classmates spread the word to all their friends, and no one, not a single person in high school, went to her on Teacher's Day. It was the most amazing feeling of accomplishment I have ever had. She had made this situation for herself by being the nastiest person I've ever met. It was no surprise that people were fine doing this to her. For the first time in 70 years in our school, a teacher had not had a single well-wisher on Teacher's Day. Well, things are never perfect, and as it so happened, word of what had conspired got to her. The next day, I had just set up the lab. The freshmen were getting settled in, and here comes MD, anger radiating from her in waves. She walks up to me, and I get the hardest slap I have ever gotten in my life, right across my face. I'd hate to admit it, but that left a blue mark on my cheek, and my nose and lip bleeding. My younger brother, who saw that happening, ran towards me, but my shock slowly subsided, and I smiled a bloody smile that probably scared him. I told him to get the vice principal. 20 minutes later, I was in the school emergency room, with a nurse wiping my lip and me holding a cloth to my nose. The vice principal comes in with the principal and 2 cops in tow. They inform me that my parents have been informed, and asked me if I would like to talk about it now or when my parents are here. I say that I can answer their questions as soon as my lip is bandaged. So I tell them about the cases of bullying against my brother and I, and also tell them that she is a really incompetent teacher. I tell the principal that he could check the school averages in science subjects, and sure as I guessed, in the average scores in the national exams, we had physics and biology come in at 92 and 90, with chemistry at a surprising 79. Topping that off with assault charges, and she lost her license to teach 2 years before she retired, and with that, lost amazing retirement benefits that the school offered. Her car also had no insurance. That is not all, though. One could ask, what would be worse? Well, consider this. The fall she had off the stool had her go to the hospital for an X-ray on her wrist and hip that she suspected might have broken. Well, the wrist sure had a hairline fracture. The hip was fine, but, well, the X-ray showed another thing. I don't think it is normal for anyone to laugh when someone is diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, but I did. Also, I later met with her only living family member, her nephew, who had long cut all contact with her, but had been contacted by the police in the hospital. He had flown back from the US for this. That's where I found out the truth. Well, I never could have guessed what I found out there. MD's mom was my great-granddad's niece, through my great-granddad's younger brother, who had stolen money from the family and tried to kill my great-granddad. Well, he was disowned, and no one knew this entire time. Well, not anyone that would care. Happy that the nasty woman is out of our lives, for good this time. Apparently she died last year with no one by her side. Too long didn't read? Nasty teacher failed my dad for no reason. When my brother and I were in school, we got bullied by her. I made her regret it. Got her teaching license revoked, retirement benefits taken, destroyed her car, fractured her wrist, and she ended up getting diagnosed with cancer. Turned out to be a family member from a line disowned long ago for attempted murder, and she died alone. I forgot to mention, MD means Miss Dumbass. That's all for now, but don't be blue. I'll be back soon with more stories for you. Remember to listen to Mr. Reddit every night, so your dreams will be wonderful like you are and bright.